Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the inaugural Singapore Art Week Art Symposium. My name is Pauline Gan from Plural Art Mag, and I will be your MC for today. To our physical audience here at Victoria Theatre in Singapore, we're so glad to have you here with us. And to our online audience watching the live stream of this event on Cystic Live from Singapore and all over the world, thank you for dialing in. Yesterday, panelists in the symposium looked at the significance of arts and cultural site and the growth of the digital realm as a potential site for artistic engagement. Today, our panels go deeper into the topic of support for the arts as our speakers consider art for the public, as well as citywide art events and the opportunities they offer for arts engagement. Our very first panel for today is titled Art for the Public, Commissions and Cultural Philanthropy. The panel will consider the role of private support and cultural philanthropy in nurturing the art industry through public art, what it means for art to be both in public and for the public. The panel will also explore the relevance of public art in fostering connections within the community that it resides in, and how the public can be involved in the creation and commissioning process. Our speakers, Ms. May Anderson and Mr. Jan Boes, and our moderator, Ms. Tamares Go, will be joining us in person. Dialing in from Japan and Australia, respectively, we're pleased to introduce speakers Mr. Fram Kitagawa and his translator, Sakutaru Yamamoto, and Ms. Emily Sullivan. Before we begin, if you have any questions for the panelists, please submit them at any time throughout this panel session through the Pigeonhole Live website. The Pigeonhole URL and event passcode will also be flashed during the panel session for your easy reference. Pigeonhole Live is an easy-to-use platform where you can submit questions for the panel of speakers. If you have a smartphone or a tablet with you now, simply launch your internet browser and enter www.pigeonhole.at into the address bar. Next, key in our event passcode, which is ARTSYMP2021, ARTSYMP2021. You will then see all the panels in this event. Please select the relevant panel and submit your questions. With that out of the way, let's kick off the first panel for today. Over to you, Tamares.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's really nice to see people over there. I realize that this is also streamed digitally, which is really nice. I think this hybrid version is really quite empowering. I think it allows us to experiment things in various different formats. We have a very lively discussion about the digital yesterday. The last panel yesterday was talking about the digital format, and it's really talking about accessibility. And right now, we're looking at accessibility in a very different way. In today's topic, we look at art for the public, commission, and cultural philanthropy, as we discuss the role of private support and cultural philanthropy, what they can do or can they do to nurture the art industry through intermediaries, like people like on stage and the one that we'll call in later, what it means for us, the art, the public. We have the honor of having with us our speakers, and I shall introduce them in alphabetical order. Ms. May Anderson, who is the chairman of Art Outreach. Mr. Jan Boes, who's the head of client strategy at UBS for global family office clients in Asia. We have also with us Fram Kitagawa-san, who is the director of Echigo-Tsumari Triennale, and Ms. Emily Sullivan, the curator of Kaldor Public Art Projects. We shall discuss their approaches in philanthropy work and, with the public and engagement, etc. today. So I very, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ms. Anderson first, who's the chairman of Art Outreach, leading projects since in the early 2000s in Art Outreach. Ms. May Anderson is I would say, very robust in the scene, and really believes in fundraising and creating things for people, and really, giving, a lot to the public and communities out there. The belief is also in education and how it serves. Yeah, maybe May can share a little bit about your project. Yeah.
Thank you, Tamares. Thanks for having me. It's beautifully organized, NAC, Plural. Art Outreach has been around for a while, at least in Singapore, 18 years, since 2003, and I've been volunteering since then with the honor of being the chair for the last 14 years. We started out in art education. We think art gives you a lot, not just in terms of being able to be visually literate enough to appreciate art, but I think, if you are able to appreciate art, you want to appreciate the context in which art is made, right? And so that means, being able to be exposed and fluent and interested in, the wider worlds of learning, right? I mean, whatever was happening historically, socially. And so we use art as a sneaky way to broaden the horizons of students in Singapore. Art Outreach is designed as a corollary to local curriculum. And so we've been going into schools, for quite a while now. And then when we approached around our 12 or 13 year, 14 year, you know how these, budding teenagers are, we became a little bit, we had the gumption to say, let's do a little bit more than art education, and we went into support for art practitioners. We launched the Impart Awards, and that gives support to emerging artists and curators. It's an art prize as well as an experience. We took them on a study exchange trip to New York City, and we have also focused outside of education and support, to access as well. So now we've been enjoying contributing to various public art programs, and that's been very special for us because, we believe that the best art, especially contemporary art, is held in private hands. So it's been quite tremendous. And maybe I'll stop there for a while because I think you want to know a little bit more about how we go about getting the support that we do. Thank you.
I'll also let Mr. Yan Boes introduce himself. He's the UBS Head of Client Strategy. And as we know, UBS is a known name when it comes to, art. It's linked with art. It has perhaps one of the largest art collections in the world. And you take care of the client strategic aspect. Can we hear from you about the work that you do?
Sure, happy to, and thanks very much for having me. Pleasure to be here. And as you mentioned, indeed, I look after client strategy for our family office clients. But broader than that, it's not only for family office clients, also for our ultra-high net worth clients. We look at ways to engage with those clients on aspects that go beyond investments. So it's basically the non-financial offering, and that incorporates things like family, passion, philanthropy, and collecting. And a very concrete example of what we do, we have for these clients, we have a number of communities that we run. For example, there is a Young Successors community, a Global Philanthropist community, and a Collectors Circle, in which we provide content that is relevant for these clients. We create connectivity between clients so that they can really reach their goals in what they aspire in each of these different topics. And you mentioned UBS is a collector. Indeed, we are one of the largest corporate collectors in the world with a magnificent collection of over 30,000 works. And obviously, that is something that we leverage for conversations with our clients. And I'm sure we can come back to that later.
Maybe before there's some similarities between the two of the work that you do. Maybe I'll just ask a few questions before we introduce the next speaker. I'm curious because these work is usually, the kind of work you do, they usually, there's, one has an association, for example, with you. that banks, making money, or there's a kind of, of course, it's or investing in art to make money, and also for Ms. May Anderson, it's about this art outreach, giving. But where do you actually receive, So I'm quite curious to know about this. What kind of things are you investing, and what is the reap of the projects?
I'll go first. Indeed, we don't look at art as an investment. And basically, art collecting is part of UBS's DNA. That's something that we have done since many, many years. And what we collect is contemporary art. We buy living artists. And the reason why we do that is because these artists, they are the spokespeople of our time. They bring topics where everyone has an opinion, whatever the opinion is. And it really challenges us, our clients, and the public when we look at these works. And so that's basically why we collect, and why we collect contemporary art. And as said, we don't look at art as an investment per se. We don't really look at art as an asset class. So we would not advise our clients on which piece to buy and make a profit on it. For us, art pays dividends, but it pays mainly emotional dividends.
Jan, there was some lovely sentiments, and I'll kind of extend it from there. That was a hard act to follow. Yes, I agree. I mean, we are a charity, I'm a volunteer. It's not so much the returns, but, it stems from the belief, why did we do this in the first place? A group of us really felt quite privileged in terms of our education, our exposure, the nurturing we received. And in Singapore, I think, there is the ability to do something like an art education charity simply because, we are not, say, struggling in a way that some third world countries are. There's been an interest in critical thinking. There's been an interest in growing entrepreneurs. There's been a longing, for people to be a little bit more, to help grow civil society, and think about some advocacy. Art does that. We believe that art is democratic because, if you're not so good at math or me or, other school subjects, visual language is a wonderful leveler. And when we started, we worked with schools that were in the peripherals, right? I mean, they're sort of neighborhood schools. And we snuck in there, and we use art as a way to get kids to think about where we are, why we do what we do. And more importantly, we were also looking to shift some of the focus and conversation on local and regional art. The Western didactic in art is very, very strong. People would know a Mona Lisa, above maybe a Georgette Chen, which is now at the National Gallery. So we were very interested in getting kids to be a lot more fluent and knowledgeable about, heritage and history and those heavy subjects, but distilled into our pedagogy, which is very, very inquiry-led and very soft and friendly. So with that, we amplified it for public programs and so on, and we think we have a small part to play in growing and improving on the face that Singapore shows to the world.
Thank you very much for your input. I shall now introduce the next panelist, Fram Kitagawa-san. Welcome for joining us. The Kitagawa-san has served as a general director of the Echigo-Tsumari Art Triennale, who is known for its pioneering efforts in rural revitalization through art that has sparked the trend of art festivals and have influenced a lot of festivals around the world. I think there was a snippet from someone who's there was a quote that said, we want the Triennale to be as enticing and as successful as Fuji Rock, So he has received high praise for his involvement in activities with work related to community development, such as his lead role in the planning of Tajikawa Art Project and the cultural activities he oversees at the Daikanyama Hillside Terrace. I believe that Kitagawa-san has some slides to show us. Thank you for joining us, by the way. Yeah.
こんにちは、北川です。お会いできてとても嬉しいです。今、東京ですが、もう0度近い冷たい雨が降っている中ですね。
This is from Kitagawa. Thank you very much for having us. I am in Tokyo now, and it's raining outside, and it's very cold here. But thank you for having me.
で、やってる仕事の説明をします。
And I'm going to show you some of the works I did in the past. Can I use the slide?
Last この地域型地域でやっている芸術祭が3つやる予定が全部、今年に、移りました。で、あともともとやろうとしているEchigo-Tsumariがある。で、来年は瀬戸内芸術祭ですね。で、これが私が日本でやっている、地域の芸術祭ですが、Echigo-Tsumariはもう世界でも最も雪が多い農村地帯でやっていますし、瀬戸内は人がもう本当に減っている離島でやっています。
So these are the 5 festivals he organizes. He was expected to do 3 regional art festivals last year, but due to the pandemic, it was postponed to this year, including Echigo-Tsumari, which is planned to held this year. He has 4 different festivals this year. And the next year, he will be having Setouchi Triennale as well.
はい。次。で、はい、次どうぞ。
And Echigo-Tsumari Triennale is held at one of the places which is famous for really heavy snow.
人口6万人の地域ですが、50日の会期で50万以上の人が来られます。
The region only has the population of around 60,000, but during the 50 days of the exhibition period, there will be about 50,000 people coming to see the artworks.
作品をちょっとお見せしますね。
And these are the past works we did.
はい、どうぞ。はい。で、これは、もう本当に山の中の小さな棚田を手前のフレームに書かれた文字と一緒に見るいわば立体絵本みたいな作品でこの地域の農業の現実を表しているイリア・カバコフの作品です。
This is one of the oldest work we did in this region. It's combined of a human-sized sculpture on the terraced rice fields, and then there will be a steel frame with the poetic text, which is a bit like a child book.
はい、次どうぞ。で、これは今川は右側の土手でまっすぐ流れていますが、昔は蛇行してた。その後を5メートル間隔で700本のポール、これ風になびくわけですが、それで昔の川筋を明らかにしている作品です。
This is the work that represents what people in this region did in the past to make their lives a bit easier. The yellow poles represent the flow of the river that used to be there.
はい、次。これは1万2000年かかって川がぐんぐんこう削っていった。その断崖面を見せているわけですね。
Yeah, this work also shows the history of the region. This represents how the river in the past eradicated the slope of the mountain and how it shaped the face of this region.
はい。これは、タイの、アーティストが自分の田舎およびこの地域の、ぐんぐん人が減っている田舎のお年寄りたちの一緒に合体した作品を作っていく。それは両方の古い地域のアルバムをみんな見ながら作っていったそういう作品ですね。
This is the artwork made by a Taiwan artist. The theme of the work is to express the problem in this region, which is the decreasing number of population. He replicated the famous painting by incorporating the faces of the people in this region and his hometown.
はい。はい。次どうぞ。でこれは壊れるばっかの家を全部、掘ることによって生き返らせ、宿泊の名所になったそういう120年前の建物ですね。
This is the artwork that tried to revive a lot of abandoned houses in this region. And what the artist did is to engrave the whole house, and then he turned it into an accommodation that the people came to visit this festival could stay.
はい。はい。これは中国にあった登り窯を日本に移築して、それを小さなミュージアムにしたものです。
This is an artwork. The artist brought this building from his hometown in China and then brought it here.
で中ではこういう展示をやってます。
And this is also used as a small museum.
はい。これは冬の間数ヶ月も夜中中除雪をしなきゃいけない。そういう除雪車でロミオとジュリエットのダンスをやる。40分のパフォーマンスとしてやったものです。
So as he said in the past, this region is really famous for the heavy snow, and they have a lot of these snow blowers, which is not used during the summer. So the artists came in and then organized the ballet for these snow blowers.
今実際にEchigo-Tsumariは2メートル50の雪が積もっています。
It is snowing in Echigo-Tsumari right now at this time as well, and the snow accumulated for about 2 meters high.
はい。これは地震で壊れそうな家を直して、その地域のお母さんたちがレストランを作っている。はい。
So this is another example of how we reveal the old abandoned houses, and this is one of the houses that's affected by the earthquake, but we turning it into a restaurant so that local mothers can work in.
ここには建築家あるいは8人の日本を代表する陶芸家が参加しています。
This is the project involved with a famous Japanese architect and 8 traditional pottery makers.
はい。はい。これはトンネルを建築家が面白く作ったものですね。
This is the project that used the abandoned tunnel.
で、はい。で、次は瀬戸内ですが、時間的にこのぐらいでちょっとやめますが、芸術祭全体では、そこの古い歴史、生活、土地、自然っていうもの、それをアーティストがその特色を発見して、それが伝わってくるような作品を作る。そしてなおかつそれを作っていく段階、もういろいろなことが全部あるんですが、それを土地の人たちと一緒にやる。そういうことによって、失われていく生活とか、 そういったものを明らかにして、その自然と人間の関わりを明らかにする、そういうような作品がだんだん出てきて、大体いろんな芸術祭では約20の国のアーティストたちが参加して、小さいところでは50組ぐらい、多いところでは150組ぐらいのアーティストが参加しています。
He has prepared a lot of pictures as well, but I think he's running out of time, so we're just going to cut it off here. But he would like to say he organizes art festivals that tries to discover these regional areas and its history, way of life, nature, and how great these places are by inviting these artists to experience these places and then rediscover the region through the eyes of the artists. And there are small art festivals and big art festivals, but we have about 50 to 150 artists from 20 different countries usually.
で、例えば瀬戸口国際芸術祭だと、海外を含めて3000人ぐらいのサポーターがこれを担っています。
And one of the important features of these art festivals is that it incorporates local people in the art creating process. In the SAW Triennale in 2019, we had about 3,000 volunteers coming into these sites and then together created artworks.
はい、じゃあ最後に瀬戸内の作品をパッとお見せして終わりにしますね。
So these are the pictures he prepared. These are the artworks for SAW Triennale.
はい、じゃあこれで終わります。はい。
Yeah, this is it for by now.
これで足して10。
Thank you for showing us all these very beautiful projects, and you know, the idea that the work is never quite completed until you get the audience participation and the community building the projects together with to really, you know, fulfill these projects. I think it's really there's a lot of tactility as well. The very next person that I'm going to introduce is Miss Emily Sullivan, who has the same, who worked at Kaldor Art Projects. Kaldor Public Art Projects was started by a person who is, I would say, a visionary, very like Kitagawa-san, who is also a philanthropist. He started the Kaldor Public Art Projects in the 1960s. Miss Emily Sullivan, who is ringing in from Sydney, is the curator of the Kaldor Public Art Project space and has curated important works by Australian and further afield artists Agatha Gotha-Snape, Alicia Frankoff, Anri Sala, Asad Raza, etc. We now invite her to speak a little bit about how Kaldor Public Art Projects is, you know, how does it pioneer new methods in education and in outreach. Yeah, maybe we welcome Miss Emily. Hello.
Thanks, Tamares.
Hi.
Hi, it's great to be here. And lovely to see those images of Echigo-Tsumari. I was very fortunate enough to travel there in 2018. And very present is that feeling of community helping to deliver artworks, which is, was really impactful to see. As you touched on, I'm the curator at Kaldor Public Art Projects. It's the first and longest running public art organisation in the world. And I've been the curator there for a few years, delivering singular solo projects by international artists and working with Australian artists as well. Something we champion at Kaldor Public Art Projects is experimentation and testing, and often when we work with artists, these are relationships that build up over 3, 4, 5 years until a project kind of lands and finds its feet and a place to be presented in Sydney. Our most iconic and our first project was with artists Christo and Jean-Claude in 1969, where they wrapped 2.5 kilometres of Sydney coastline. And it was a real challenging project, not just for the artists, but for audiences at the time. A lot of criticism, but also a lot of love and a lot of support for something as ambitious as that, which a lot of audiences in Sydney had never seen before. And from there, the organisation really grew to what it is today. As you mentioned, John Kaldor, our founder and director, is a philanthropist and a real advocate for the arts in Australia. I should also mention that the organisation was given charitable status in 2004. And at that point, our model really shifted to be a combination of public and private support. So in the form of private donors, philanthropic, corporate and government support. And I think it's this model that really has allowed the organisation to be as agile and as responsive as it is today. And obviously that's never as important as it is at the moment. And since 2020 in particular. So I think looking at the history of the organisation from where we've come from to our most recent project, which was Do It Australia, which was the organisation's first digital public art project. The very notion of the public and what was public art really transformed overnight for us in 2020. Brought the domestic reality into sharp focus. And so we had to conceive of a project that reflected that. So it evolved really quickly. We wanted to support artists. We wanted to create powerful experiences for audiences in those early days of lockdown. And to do that, we really relied on the support of long-term philanthropic supporters. I guess key to that relationship is aligning the interests of our organisations, ensuring those supporters and funders had the confidence in our ability to deliver a project really quickly. We're kind of conscious to look for opportunities to always leverage and encourage audience engagement, because I think what we often see with philanthropic bodies and other funders is this need to show or to visualize impact and reach. I know these are some of the things we're touching on, but you mentioned education programs as a kind of follow-on project to this Do It Australia project that we delivered. We also delivered a partner education program that we rolled out with schools in Australia. But it was a program that became applicable for people at home all around the world. And I think that was the real strength of the project. I think we can dive into some details perhaps with some more questions, Tamares.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. This is a question for Emily and Kitagawa-san. The projects are, it's almost like a mission for these projects that they would be free for the public, because it's right out there, and it has to be the word that I spot is really that art should be everywhere and quite intrinsic for the people out there. Yeah, so maybe a more mechanical question is like, how do you receive fundings and how to receive people and urge people to give? Yeah.
I might jump in while that's all right.
Yes,
as I mentioned, we have support from various levels of government, from private donors. I think the key challenge for us as an organisation, we tend to deliver a project every year to every 18 months, is I guess getting our funders and our funding bodies on board with the project and really advocating for artists. So that's the constant in our work to secure funding, is advocating for the role that these artists can play. In our history, our mandate has been to bring international artists to Australia, to embed them within the local arts context, to introduce them to artists, to introduce them to local practice. And that's really valuable for Australian audiences, but for Australian artists. And I think that's something that, you know, we're aware of is whenever we deliver a project is what are the benefits for audiences and how to convey them or how to align them best to our funders. So sometimes it's a bit of a dance, you know, we're trying to align with the values of an organization. We are very fortunate to have a key supporter in Bloomberg Philanthropies, and, you know, they're similar to UBS in many ways, you know, very strong supporters of the arts and art for art's sake, which I think is the most important and most valuable kind of opinion you can have when giving in this context. And that obviously, you know, it helps to have relationships like that. But constant advocacy is obviously key to maintaining those relationships.
はい。日本の芸術祭の場合は、それぞれの芸術祭で、割合は違いますが、例えばEchigo-Tsumariの場合は、約、600万ドルの資金がかかっています。で、そのうちの、2割が地方政府。それで、4割がいろいろ企業とか個人のいろいろな意味での提供。で、3割が、これ入場無料ではなくて、皆さんが入場料というか、そういうのを払っています。
Okay, so he would like to talk about the Japanese art festival's case. For example, for Echigo-Tsumari, it takes about $6 million to organize this festival every time. This is like a rough estimate, but 20% of it comes from the regional government, and the 40% comes from the donation or private supports. And then 30% actually comes from the ticket revenue. It's not really a free, we still sell tickets as well. And then 30% comes from that revenue.
他の特徴としては、そのEchigo-Tsumariの場合は、オーストラリア政府が、ある程度手伝ってくれてる。そして香港の今、香港の文化部が手伝ってくれる。それぞれのハウスを持ってるというようなことも起きています。
So, and the other examples could be a support from other countries. For example, we have what is called Australia House and Hong Kong House as well. So these are supported by the Australian government and Hong Kong and Cultural Ministry.
Yeah, this is a question for everyone in the panel about giving. You know, because times are a bit uncertain right now, as we know with the pandemic, has it altered the way you work? I think first of all for the public projects, that things are really needing to be so tactile and you know, really having people to come together, crowds coming together, you know, even for art outreach as well, you know, even organizing events, you know, or people giving, you know, because times is really so uncertain. How do you plan for such things, and what is the behaviors like? Has it altered? Yeah, maybe I can hear from May first. Yeah.
Sure. I think the pandemic is certainly a very challenging time, but it just sharpens, or it really brings into focus, in my opinion, the need for a very, very strong and rigorous business approach to managing our organizations. Many art and heritage organizations are, of course, societies and non-profits or quasi-government, bodies. And there's a lot of, you know, as Jan, you said, emotion and very apparent love that all of us in the arts have for what we do. Sometimes that's a problem because, you know, we tend to run away, you know, with the enthusiasm, you know, with, the ideas and the belief that what we do is, as Emily says, you know, art for art's sake, the value of that. But I would caution, organizations, to actually think about alignment with funders, and this could be, public funders, private funders like UBS, sort of alignment with their needs and their ideals. I've been told sometimes that this is a little bit of a sellout. I don't think so, because when I run a nonprofit like Art Outreach, I do have to be aware of and very, very respectful of the amazing, noble work that other charities do, those that alleviate hunger, and of course, many other, help with education and health. An arts charity needs, an arts organization needs to have additional, I think, additional layer of accountability, of ability, to match and meet, I guess, our obligations to the people who are our patrons, and be sure that what we deliver is indeed something that has to be received very well for the audiences. I think all too often, if you indulge me a little bit, it can be a little bit like navel gazing, right? You kind of look at it yourself and you're very happy with it, but in terms of audience engagement, reach, impact, that always is something that we all struggle with.
On our side, first of all, the pandemic has nothing changed or didn't change anything to our commitment to art. So obviously there have been challenges. Look at Art Basel, for example, that has been postponed, and so many other fairs and other activities, events that we had planned. But it also challenged us to do new things, to experiment with other things we had not done before. We organized artist talks, for example, something that clients could not get access to easily before. So that is one aspect of the whole thing. Secondly, if I look at what clients are doing, and what we saw during the whole pandemic, is that a lot of the donations or a lot of the money that clients were giving was redirected immediately to COVID. So it was very reactive, very, very immediate. Okay, there is a need, and clients, and not only our clients, it's something that you see across the world. People redirected their funds into the COVID pandemic, which created in a way a void in the arts world, because it was not seen as life-saving. So a lot of musea, etc., have been suffering quite a bit. At a point when that came apparent, you see that funds were redirected, and there was a lot of support towards the arts. Something that we always say to our clients is, when they get involved or active into philanthropy, it's really something for long term. You have to have a strategy behind, like, what is the purpose? And then you can find purpose in many things. You can find purpose in your collection. If you're an art collector, I think first and foremost your purpose should be pleasure. Otherwise you can look for another hobby, I think. But what do you want to do long term with your collection? And the same with philanthropy. If you combine art, philanthropy, or you're actively in other philanthropic engagements, what is your long-term plan? What do you want to achieve with this? What is really the purpose of it? And I think that is really key in whatever you undertake.
Thanks, Jan. Any response from Emily or Kitagawa-san?
I think I would just echo what Jan was saying about adaptation and changing tact. For us, the digital project, wasn't something that we had planned on doing, but it created significant opportunities for artists. We were fortunate that we had the support to deliver the project, but there was a significant redirection of funds going elsewhere. But equally important was the need to, and it was a big driver for us, create something for audiences to do at home. So with one urgent issue brought another urgent need, and so I think that the onus really should be on artists and arts organizations to fill those gaps for society. It was certainly something that we took up as a responsibility of ours, to deliver a program that could support artists and audiences both. So a huge opportunity for us, and I think that's the way we should continue to look at it.
はい。ただ 先ほどジャンさんが話したこととは僕はだいぶ考え方が違います。でやっぱり、いろんな土地を旅行する、そしてそこの人たちと話す、でそこの食事をするっていうのは人類がやっぱり勝ち得てきたものすごく重要な時空間の体験です。これがパンデミックでやっぱり失われていくっていうこと、これは相当大きな問題で、そこはなんとか突破していかなきゃいけない。でいろんな意味で安全とかそういったガードは考えていますが、作品はそこに存在するわけで、そこに人が行けるということをやっぱり可能な限りやっぱり追求したいと思います。でもう一つ、この間、この半年ぐらい僕らがやってきたことは、芸術祭に参加する国際的なアーティストたちが今何をし何を考えているかっていうことを毎日インスタグラムで投稿してきました。これはものすごく作品そのものではないけれども、やっぱりアーティストがやっぱりどういう考えで何を準備しているか、そういったことがすごくよく分かって、よく分かりました。だからデジタルないろんな検討はできるだけやりたいけれども、やっぱりその場所に行ってそこの生活、歴史、そして文化と体験するっていうことはやっぱりもう断固追求しなきゃいけないというふうに思っています。
So it might be different from what other panelists might have said, but he thinks although it became quite difficult to go to the sites and experience local foods and meet the local people, or experience local foods, and these kind of experience became quite difficult due to the pandemic, but we still think this is something we have to overcome and achieve. That's still a vital experiences for us. So we are preparing for Echigo-Tsumari Triennale this year, but the fundamental line we try to maintain is that people can go there and then see the artworks. Although, we still have to think about all those safety concerns and everything, but we still think physically being there is still quite the important thing. And that's the ultimate goal that we have to achieve at this time. And another thing that some of you have spoken about, the shift to the digital medium, and he actually did one project on Instagram, which is called Artist's Breath. What he basically did was ask each artist to join his art festivals to produce 2-minute long videos of them recording their lives or what they are thinking during the pandemic time, or basically the archive of what artists were thinking of this pandemic. This was quite important to see what these different kinds of people or artists are thinking about this time. So we can still think of these digital mediums and then the way to do art project on digital platforms, but he still thinks this is quite important that we can physically go to the places and an experience.
Thank you, Sakutaro-san, and thank you, Kitagawa-san. We have, I think we'll start with some of the questions from the public. I think I've seen a lot of votes for this question. I'll start asking it first. Could additional funding for public community art improve the quality of these projects? Or is the hiring of art practitioners or change in vetting processes for proposals more crucial? This is a question for perhaps Emily, if you'd like to take this question, or May, if you could see that there's any, whether additional funding for public community art improve the quality of these projects. I think mainly, or the other option is hiring of art practitioners or change in vetting processes or for proposals more crucial? Yeah, we have about 4 votes for this question, so yeah. So if anyone want to take this question.
I'm just going to jump in and say, I would say both. I think, maybe I'll jump out of pandemic moment for a second, but I think certainly community arts has been something that's growing in Australia, and there's a lot of traction for how much it supports artistic process. And I think that's really critical for a lot of contemporary artists at the moment, and something that there isn't enough support of. There's a lot of funding opportunities out there for artists to realize works, to produce kind of final outcomes, but less so for valuing artistic process and experimentation and play. So personally, I value that as being, quite important for artists from conversations I'm having. But equally, the practitioners, they bring a certain knowledge and expertise that can support artistic practice as well. I might leave it there for the moment, maybe having to join.
Anyone has anything to add to? Yeah.
I'll jump in and say I agree. Actually, Emily's response was quite complete in my opinion. But even with the funds available, I think there has to be support for the vetting process, the process of selection. And this is where, we would love to see more collaboration with, curators, and especially for public art. A lot of artists have not had the opportunity to make artworks that are not just public in nature, but, in a manner that will withstand the rigor of outdoor display. There has to be clarity on whether it's temporal or whether it's something permanent, which is quite unusual these times to get funding for something like that. So there has to be quite a lot of thought, even in sort of the installation engineering processes, and I think a more rounded approach to expertise on a supporting panel or a supporting committee would be quite critical in ensuring a level of quality, for such projects.
Another question is, are there specific themes, mediums, or subject matter that appeal most to those wanting to fund or to collect the arts? Yeah, I think these are do you witness that whether there's any specific medium or, subject matter that appeal to those who want to collect the art? Maybe Jan can advise?
Sure. If I look at UBS as a corporate collector, for us, there is a couple of logistical matters that play, obviously, because what we do with our artwork, our works are on view in the offices around the world. So what we collect is mainly paintings, drawings, etc., things that can be easily hung and seen. There is constraints in terms of size and so on. So it's also a practical matter. And if I draw the line to what our clients collect, it really depends very much on each individual. As every collector is different. Everyone has their own reason or purpose to collect. There is people who support a certain artist, a certain stream, a certain thought. And we have clients who have massive works, huge works. So it's very, very personal, I think.
May had was sharing with us backstage about her work that you feature in Outreach. Maybe you can describe the work.
Thanks. Tamares, I was hoping for a chance to talk about this, and I'm just going to jump in here. We are so proud about the 4th edition of the Impart Collector Show that Art Outreach puts together, and I take some of the comments earlier that we've all had to pivot to digital, but the question is not to let the digital, offering be a poor facsimile or sort of a second-class, way of engaging audiences and allowing them access. So what we did was we tried to show works that would not normally be so easily, brought to Singapore and installed in an exhibition. And to Jan's point, this really illustrates the passion and the beautifully titled leap of faith that collectors take, and this was titled by our curatorial advisor Tan Boon Hui, where you see artworks that really boggle the mind. I think you guys were amused by one where living fish were in a plastic bag, and the bag had holes punctured in it, and water is dripping into a mound of earth. The bag is suspended very dramatically, and of course it's a interesting message about sort of fragility of the environment and so on. Yuwa Hono collects this amazing piece, and Jan is right. We see a proliferation of interests and ideas, and it's very encouraging because it's not just with the collectors that are very established, but we also talked about younger collectors who are willing to take some risks. I do worry a little bit though, Tamares, about trying to, if you are a funder, trying to sort of steer an artist or art collective into a certain kind of style of artwork, to meet the funding requirements is always a very delicate balance. But let me get back to plugging, artoutreachsingapore.org to come and see some of the amazing things that the collectors have gotten, and in that sense, their advocacy for the artists and their practices, which is quite phenomenal.
Yeah, which relates to one of the questions as well. One of the things that perhaps is on a lot of people's mind, and perhaps Kitagawa-san can also answer that when it comes to government giving money to support your initiative. Kitagawa-san, you were mentioning that 40% comes from the government in some of the projects. How much must you adhere to the requirements of, whether it's taste or whether it's cultural policies, how if they want to direct the way that you do your work, what impact would it have on your work? Yeah.
40% ぐらい政府のお金をもらっていると聞いたんですけど、それはあなたがプロジェクトやる上でどのよう例えば政府からこういうふうにしてくださいみたいな話があるとか、何か影響がありますでしょうか？
全くそういう意味での指示とかそういういろんなことはありません。こちらが決めていくやり方、それこちらが選んでいくアーティストにお任せになります。で、あともう一つ申し上げますと、いわゆる僕が選んで招待する作家もいますが、僕がやっている芸術祭は必ず国際的なコンペティションをやっていますね。ですから外国の若い作家たちもかなり入ってくるチャンスがある。そういうふうにやっていますね。で、お金はもちろんあることはいろいろいいけれども、ないならないなりにいろいろな工夫をする。そういう中でEchigo-Tsumariの場合は行政のお金が非常に少なかった。で、今では若手、起業家たちが結構一生懸命応援しだしました。そういうことも起きてきますね。はい。
As for the interference from the local government and taste or selection of the artist, he has no experience in these types of things. Luckily, local government just gives him the full authority and in terms of the selection of artists and how to organize these festivals. The one thing he would like to add is that most of the time he runs these art festivals, he tends to have international open calls or like competitions so that young artists from Japan or overseas can easily find a way to join in his art triennales. Another interesting trend that he experiences is that, as he said, just 40% of the whole budget comes from the regional government. It's not a huge amount, to say the least. And what he experiences in these days is that there are a lot of private businessmen or like a business persons who want to support these art festivals, and then they provide significant support in terms of the finance and other means as well to his projects.
もう一つ、パンデミックの中ですごく変わってきたことがありまして、今まで企業はそういうプロジェクトにお金を出すと、そういうことはありましたが、それだけではなくて、自分のところのスタッフ、社員たちを、これパンデミックの前からの傾向ではありますが、今は特にそうで、そういった作品はアーティストが割と作るんだけれども、それまでのいろいろなプロセス、そういったことに、社員たちが関わるっていうことが、会社の今後体質の中でものすごい重要だと。それはなぜかというと、田舎は自然と非常に密接な関わり方で生きている。ですから自然環境、そういったものであらゆることが市場化、都市化することに対して地球環境はいかに大切だというふうなことをやっぱり学んでいけるものすごいチャンスになっている。そういう形で、つまりアートの社内化とも言うべきことがものすごく進んでいる。それが大きな変化ですね。
Another important or like interesting change he experienced during the pandemic is that in the past there were a lot of business persons who run businesses who would like to support his projects. But what he's experiencing now is that they wanted their staff to join in. Sorry, it says time is running out, but so what he basically said is that a lot of business owners want their staff to experience the countryside and the art making process as well. So in addition to the monetary support, they would often ask him to let their staff join in the art production. The main reason why is that we run these festivals in the countryside, like regions with nature, with nature. So what we experienced during the pandemic is that a lot of shortcomings of the city areas. So after the pandemic, they thought it's important for their staff to experience the nature and these art making process altogether, so that they can internalize art making processes into their company's culture.
Thank you. Thank you very much for today's session. I hear from the panelists today the reinstatement that it's time is important in this fact that you really need to cultivate art appreciation, and is via education, which is in a lot of the work that Art Outreach is doing in Kaldor public art projects. Kitagawa's work, also Jan's work in UBS. Really, it's not just, it's really a long term. It's not simply, you cannot just reap the rewards immediately. Really, it requires a long time, to foster. You also mentioned some of the points that in terms of behavior, we think that COVID-19 pandemic is you think that people might want to retract, and not to really give in terms of uncertainty, but it might also spark off, different modes of thinking, I would say. And also we hear about how we can experience, that I think if we continue, even though works that is quite needing to be physical, but I think we're also trying means and ways to also connect with people in other ways via the digital or other hybrid formats, if you would say. Okay, thank you very much for today's session. Really appreciate. And I'll hand over back to Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily, from Sakutaro, May, Jan, and of course Tamares for this enlightening session. We will now take a short break for the changeover in panels. We hope you continue to stay with us. The next panel will commence at 3:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.